Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Women's Eye podcast. I'm Stacey Gualandi. Thank you for tuning in today. Now, here on the Women's Eye, we like to shine a light on fascinating females who are really making a difference and saving lives. Now, this episode is brought to you by the CASCO Financial Group in Phoenix, Arizona. CASCO's president, Catherine Scrivano, started her business to help people create the financial strength to achieve their dreams. Well, I have a dream guest today. Author Judy Pearson returns to our podcast with her latest book, Crusade to Heal America, The Remarkable Life of Mary Lasker. Now, you may be asking, who is Mary Lasker and why was she remarkable? Well, for starters, Mary's crusade got federal funding for medical research to help improve the health of all Americans starting in the mid-1900s. And she's phenomenal. She was a woman clearly ahead of her time. And we have you, Judy, to thank for sharing this never before told story of Mary's work that continues to this day to save millions of lives. Welcome back to the show, Judy.
Thank you so much. Gosh, I don't have to say anything. You covered it all.
I know. I'm like so excited about this book. I'm like, what? I'm blah, 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 blah. But before we get into the remarkable Mary Lasker, I want to talk about the remarkable Judy Pearson, because you've been on our show, as I mentioned, and this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So, and also Liver Cancer Awareness Month too. But you are, my dear, a cancer survivor and thriver. And I want you to talk about that, but also the fact that you started a nonprofit to help cancer survivors called A Second Act. And I want to see how you and that is doing right now.
So I'm doing very well, thank you. My treatment, diagnosis and treatment were in 2011. And when I got to the other side of treatment, I had already had 2 published books. On the other side of treatment, I just couldn't find the next great story to tell. I'm a storyteller. So I wrote a little anthology, or collected some stories that I had written during treatment into a little anthology called It's Just Hair, 20 Essential Life Lessons, because yes, your hair comes out with some chemotherapy drugs, but it's such a money saver and a time saver. I loved being bald. But that aside, I was meeting survivors who were doing amazing things in their survivorship. And so A Second Act was created so that they could share their stories to inspire other survivors. And we were women-centric just because I was a woman, and we figured the boys could go create their own organization. And then I met the woman who became the inspiration for my last book, which was when I was on in 2021, From Shadows to Life. It was a biography, a group biography of the survivorship movement. And from that book, I learned about the inimitable Mary Lasker. And I should say, I can't be a full-time biographer and run a nonprofit. So many of the programs from Second Act have gone to other nonprofits in the Phoenix metro area. But the storytelling event is being replicated by a gal who was a storyteller, and its proceeds, the show will be next year, and the proceeds will go to the Joy Bus Diner, which Phoenix residents are really familiar with. They do great things.
Well, you started this amazing thing in Phoenix. Now you're going to be leaving Phoenix, right? So,
I am.
Yeah.
I'm picking up mountains for the beaches.
Exactly, heading to Florida, but we've got you in Phoenix right now, and obviously people know you so well there. But what's interesting is people don't really know who Mary Lasker is, which right. I find to be, I was so mad at myself that I've never heard of this woman, you know. So, but by the fact of your experience dealing with cancer and the books that you've written, it almost was like she was kind of presented to you on a platter, I suppose, right? Or no?
That's right. That's right. And in fact, I kind of felt a little bit like George Lucas with his Star Wars movies. This book, Crusade to Heal America, is really the prequel to the last book that came out. So I kind of did them out of order. But Mary's Lasker anonymity was a little bit by design. She didn't do what she did for glory, and certainly not for money. She preferred to be, as she called herself, a catalytic agent. And she just wanted to churn things from behind to get attention for this desperate need for medical research. There was no medical research being done in the United States in 1940, which is pretty remarkable. And 40% of the men who the next year signed up for military duty when we went into World War II, 40% of them were denied because they had health issues that weren't being paid attention to.
It's crazy because this was something she was a fascinating woman even before she started all of this fighting for medical research. What was it about her, do you think, that no matter what she touched, she just she moved mountains and became a success even before all of this?
She really did. And I honestly think 100% of her drive and personality came from her mother. Her mother immigrated to the United States in about the 1880s, I think. Mary was born in 1899. And Sarah, her mother, came from Ireland. She was 18 years old, came all by herself, and within a decade had become the highest paid woman in the city of Chicago. She was the head of the dressmaking department for Carson Peary Scott. And that in itself was really remarkable. And then after she married, and her husband was a very successful banker in Watertown, Wisconsin, little Watertown, she went on city beautification drives and she led civics clubs. She felt that being useful and giving back, as we say now, was incredibly important. And so she taught Mary, and education. She felt both her daughters, Mary had a younger sister, both her daughters were going to be educated. And that's just what launched Mary down the road.
You know, it's funny. I mean, someone like her doesn't come around too often, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
But it's almost like, thank goodness for people like her, because I mean, I guess she really could be credited with the war on cancer. That was something that she couldn't understand. I guess I'm just trying to think, why did she have such amazing foresight, do you think?
Well, and it was, cancer ended up being her biggest crusade, her crusade's biggest focus. But it was health in general. So as a child, and I have to say that she recorded an oral history for Columbia University that spanned 3 decades. Columbia transcribed it. It was something like 2,000 pages that I had access to just from my office in Phoenix. And it was terrific because I could, although I had heard her voice, I could really hear it coming through these words. So she described this time that her mother took her to visit the family laundress who had just had a mastectomy. And on the way, Mary said, "You mean they cut off her breast?" And Sarah said, "Yes, they did." And Mary's description of the scene with this woman lying on this low cot and her pitiful children sort of assembled around her, Mary just was so moved by that. And then fast forward to the age of 18, she got the Spanish flu, the last pandemic in 1918. And she just resolved that when and if she could, she was going to do things to better women's health or human health. And so actually her first interest was in mental health.
Yes, in fact, it's almost like, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but you've even said that we need a Mary, or people have been saying we need a Mary Lasker now to deal with the whole issue of mental health too. But we'll get to that too. But how fortuitous was it that Mary Lasker met her husband, who at the time was the father of advertising? I think I'm getting his name or his title wrong, but how awesome was it that those two came together? Because it is quite a wonderful love story between the two of them.
It was. The stars absolutely aligned. Albert Lasker was the father of modern advertising, they call it, because he injected graphics into it. He came up with the idea of send in box tops and we'll send you a spoon or something. And so
see, he came up with Kleenex.
Kleenex and Sunkissed and Sunsweet. the names. But so by the time they married, his first wife had died. They were very much in love. And then he was briefly married a second time to a starlet that didn't go so well. So he was single. Mary had divorced her first husband. And where Albert had the business and marketing know-how, Mary had certainly entertaining and art in her hip pocket. But more than that, she was terrific at networking. And she actually had this little side hustle going on where she would bring people together. And if a contract resulted from it, they'd give her a little percentage kickback. It was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
And so the two of them got together. They fell madly in love. They so admired one another's skills and drive. And it was just such a true love story. And Albert was about 20 years older than Mary, but which at the time was not as accepted and not as frequently seen, I think, as it is now. But they were just beautiful together.
No, and your book is so awesome too, in terms of the name dropping. Like they knew everybody who was anybody in that era. I mean, it reminded me kind of the Gilded Age, the show on HBO. You know, it was very much all of these inner workings of all of these tremendously rich but famous and people who got America going in a way too. And I love it too, because I'm coining your phrase. You call it, not only was she a fundraiser, she was a friend raiser.
Right. Because Albert had worked for the shipping board about a decade earlier. So he had a good idea of how the government worked. And he had said to Mary, you know, if we're going to fight disease, we're going to need more than our money, because even our money can't help. The government is where we need to go. So they would friend raise, inviting people to important people to parties, and then encourage those people to make donations to congressmen, senators, presidents who had sympathy for this non-existent medical research.
She was so, I mean, she literally, she was an FDR. I mean, like she friend of FDR. She was so entrenched in eventually into politics, but that was where the money was. That's where they said, this is what we need to do is, you know, outside of our own money, we need to help raise the money to, fund all this medical research, not only the National Institute. I mean, she pretty much revamped the National Institute of Health. They renamed it, the original organization, to the American Cancer Society. I mean, it started with these two. That's what's just unbelievable.
It really did. And again, it was Albert's acumen helping her understand to break numbers down into something that was understandable. And rather than saying, we're losing a lot of money because people are ill, Mary could produce statistics and say, this year in America, we're going to lose X millions of dollars because X number of people have been diagnosed with heart disease and cancer and either are dying or can't work. And it was just a brilliant way to do it. And then one of our other famous lines, she was on the wonderfully well-known Edward R. Murrow program, early television. And she said that less money is being spent per person on cancer research than a stick of chewing gum costs. So everybody's mind could go to, okay, chewing gum, because Wrigley was one of Albert's big clients. So they could understand the little paltry amount of money that was being spent on medical research.
So what can we thank? And clearly we thank her, we thank you for bringing her into the spotlight in such a way, but what do we owe Mary Lasker to this day, would you say?
I think aside from the obvious, as we've talked about, you know, because the research then leads to discoveries that lead to treatment, and heart disease we're doing a great job with. Cancer is just a very difficult and complicated topic. But my favorite quote in the whole world is from the cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead. And she said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, concerned citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I really would like readers to realize that, yes, Mary was connected and she had money, but everybody has to take a first step in reform or in a journey or in whatever floats your boat. And anybody can do this. Anybody can change the world.
Well, and also too, the fact that they did live, a wonderful life and a very privileged life. Clearly they earned it. They worked very hard to,
Sure.
it wasn't like money that was just handed to them, but also, they could have just not wanted to delve into this entire endeavor. They could have spent their time doing other things, but this is something that they were so driven to really basically help Americans.
Absolutely.
Why would I'm trying to understand why she was such a selfless person,
Again, I think
selfless, not selfish.
You're right. Again, I think that it's a little bit background. It's a little bit how she was raised. And then seeing that she could potentially move the needle, which she did indeed, in helping humanity. It really, and as I look back at my previous books, I realize that they are all about people who stepped up when they really didn't need to. Not all of them were rich, but they certainly didn't need to go on this selfless journey that they went on. And furthermore, I think the question you're asking, the motivation for that always intrigues me. There's lots of reasons, but someplace, Stacey, it has to just come from like deep down where they just are going to go do it. And Albert sadly died of cancer in 1952. It was called intestinal cancer or abdominal cancer. I think it was really colon cancer. And Mary took a few months off to grieve, understandably, but then she really doubled down on this because she was just insistent that she was going to find somebody who could then find a cure for cancer.
I know that's what's so sad, because with all the money and all the success and everything that they had done, it's, that he succumbed, right, to cancer. That's very, very sad. But like you said, doubling down, I mean, it went all the way up to Richard Nixon and his administration. Yep. That was the biggest, I think, was the Cancer Act that she was able to get through. Talk about that and what an impact that has made to this day as well.
Well, and although that culminated with President Nixon signing that in 1971, and Mary lived until 1994, it was really the most pivotal thing I think that she was able to do. And it didn't come easy because it was, in some cases, people just would throw up their hands and say, well, it's the will of God. There's nothing to be done. We might as well just stop knocking our heads against the wall. And if cancer comes, cancer comes. And she would have none of that. So she really reeled in her political contacts. She was very wise in adding to the original panel of consultants that got the ball rolling, Republicans and Democrats, because cancer is not a very political.
Yeah, it's not targeting any one individual. Right. Yeah.
And lay individuals along with medical individuals, so that she could get the broadest spectrum of people working on this. And then over the course of by then, almost 30 years of her lobbying Congress, she understood that not only do you get a bill passed, but then it also has to go through appropriations, which is a whole other set of negotiations to actually get the money. But the political intrigue behind that Cancer Act, because you had a president who just wanted to be reelected, you had a senator, Ted Kennedy, who just wanted redemption.
Yeah.
And you had from Chappaquiddick, and then you had Mary Lasker, who just wanted to cure cancer.
Right. And she was able to kind of manipulate all that a little in a good way.
Yeah, exactly. But the political soup was just wow. And then even the actual signing, you can find a video of it on online on YouTube, and the actual signing and watching Kennedy line up behind Nixon and put his hands on his chair like, hey, I'm watching you. It was the best. It was just absolutely the best to write.
Exactly, because it almost seems like it was something that came out of it that wasn't necessarily for the purpose of what Mary's goal was, but it was all political. But
That's right.
but clearly, what she was able to accomplish. What do you think she would think about where we are now in terms of healthcare and, you know, curing cancer and mental health? What do you think she would think about all this?
So in the cancer world, even if someone like me has no evidence of disease, that's what we call it when you're NED, no evidence of disease, we really avoid the word cure, which would have been hard for Mary to wrap her mind around because we'd cured these other diseases, polio, and why can't we cure cancer? But I think, and she actually saw this a little bit toward the end of her career in the 80s, late 70s and 80s, when interferon, which is an element in the blood that can be withdrawn through centrifuge, when that became a possibility for really latching on to cancer. And at the same time, we were beginning to look at cancer viruses and teaching what we now call immunotherapy, teaching the body to attack cancer just like it attacks any other disease, like a virus.
Yeah.
And so I think she would have to be at least somewhat gratified. And truly, the Cancer Act, that was $1.7 billion in 1971, which is 11.8 billion today. And so that research started the snowball that probably led to my drugs and all the drugs that have come afterwards and all the research. So it's this snowball effect. Maybe the specific drug didn't come out of that, but certainly one link leads to another. And she couldn't help but being satisfied. Although even when the National Institutes of Health dedicated a building to her, her remarks ended with, "Now let's all get back to work."
Yeah. She's like, enough about me. I want to go of course on this.
Move on.
In writing this book, did you find yourself very grateful for Mary Lasker?
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And in fact, I had a picture of her on my desk, and not this particular picture, which I think is great. This was taken the day after she and Albert were married by a very famous British photographer. My publisher, Mayo Clinic Press, got the rights from the London Gallery, National Gallery, to put it on the book cover.
Wow.
But I had a picture on my desk, and every day I would look at her and say, "Okay, Mary, so where are we going to go today? And what are we going to do today? And I know you'd really hate this, but we have to do this." People need to know about you.
Yeah. Writing this book, though, I mean, obviously one of your goals, I imagine, was just to tell an amazing story as a storyteller, to make us aware of this woman because she's incredible. But was there another thing that you wanted to accomplish in writing this book?
I think, having personally been through cancer, you hear the word, you don't know really anything about it. You know that it exists, but unless it's affected you or a close family member, you can't really wrap your mind around what your particular cancer is, what's going to happen, and it's terrifying. I won't lie, it's terrifying. And so I think it's interesting and hopefully helpful for cancer survivors and their families to read about the history of the drug treatment, to know how far we've come considering where we were, and to know that the National Institutes of Health, that's what they're there for. And they are continuing to do this research. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is that the institutes share information. So what cancer learns, they can share with infectious diseases and vice versa, or the Heart Institute. And it's just this wonderful conglomeration of knowledge that really is because of Mary.
Yeah. I mean, what should we learn from Mary Lasker, do you think? If there's anybody out there like her, we, step right in,
Call me.
I know. So, but what is it that we should really take away from this amazing woman from history?
I think that, first of all, if people are not necessarily nonfiction readers, biography readers, maybe take a second look at that. We were talking about it a little bit ago. I write narrative nonfiction, and I am not alone in that. It's nonfiction that has setting and character development and lots of description. And you can very much feel like it's a novel, except it's true. And so a lot of people shy away from nonfiction because they think it's going to be boring. Biography is not that way. And if you want some names of other authors, contact me. I'll be happy to give you some lists. So I really encourage that, because there's so many wonderful people whose stories we should know. Then, of course, the inspiration just to, pick up a phone, open your laptop, do something, whatever that is, to help, excuse me, fellow humans. And then just, I guess, I wake up every day with a sense of hope. And Mary had that as well. I hope that that these diseases are finally harnessed. I hope that everybody can just get along. And that's another really big lesson in this book. Mary was practically thrown out of a senator's office because he didn't want to listen to her asking for money. And he called her about a week later and invited her back. And she said, "I'm confused. Why did you want to speak to me?" And he said, "Because right after you left, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. Oh. And I'd like to help you." So to realize that, that everybody can be touched by diseases. And so these types of subjects should be apolitical. They shouldn't be determined by which party wants to get their candidate ahead.
And also, they're not sympathetic to it until it actually hits close to home.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think you've referred to her as the first boss babe, and she definitely is. And I love narrative nonfiction, because it really does read like you created this novel, that you created this woman out of thin air, because she is just so remarkable, to be quite honest. And I feel like this could be a movie. Have you been hit up at all
Not yet. It's a little early because the book just came out September 19th, but my agent has a short list. And once we get past this early flurry, then we'll turn our attentions to that. And of course, all along, I had in mind who I'd like to see in the starring role.
Can you say?
Sure, Meryl Streep.
Oh, she would be amazing.
She was so good in Iron Lady.
Yep.
Absolutely see her as Mary.
Yeah,
Meryl, if you're listening, give me a call.
So I'll tag her on this.
There you go. That'd be great.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Judy, for writing this. It's remarkable. I feel like there's sections I want to go back and read, because I feel like I'm paling by comparison. Like, I need to step up and do something, and maybe that's the reaction people will have to this book. So I
hope so. It's available everywhere books are sold.
Fantastic. So yes, and of course, thank you, Judy Pearson, but you can also learn more about Judy and the Crusade to Heal America by going to our website, thewomenseye.com. And there you also find our books, 20 Women Changemakers. Just shop wherever you buy books, and at changemakersbook.com. And one more, 20 Women Storytellers at womensstorytellers.com. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, buy the book, and subscribe to our newsletter and YouTube channel. Again, thank you, Judy. It's just a wonderful, wonderful book. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in to the Women's Eye podcast. I'm Stacey Gualandi. Remember, it's the world as we see it.